Hello and welcome to round 2 here at Grand Prix Portland. We see on the left of our scene Shady, Badran, Alex Sittner and Jacob Winn. On the right of our screen the powerhouse team of Eric Froelich, Luis Scott-Vargas and Paul Cheon. Luis Scott-Vargas is the player we're going to start with up against Alex Sittner. He's facing down a turn 1 Elvish Mystic there from Sittner with a turn 1 Evolving Wilds finding him a swamp. Evolving Wilds, a very important card in this format. There's not a huge amount of mana fixing, and I'm guessing it's one of the cards that there's a little bit of a fight over in a lot of deck construction, see who gets it.
Yeah, I imagine Evolving Wilds is going to Luis here because he's splashing something red or splashing something blue, perhaps one of the Curd Ape cards like Jerobai Murklurker or Nightfire Giant.
Absolutely there, and we see there that he's able to get down a 1/3 blocker, which is going to hold off Elvish Mystic, but a Satyr Wayfinder here, another important piece of the puzzle potentially for Alex Sittner. He's able to find a land there, 3 cards go to the graveyard. The Wayfinder just really good in just about any deck you can play it in, possibly at its best in green-white or in the black-green decks that are using graveyards, but just a solid inclusion no matter which way you slice it.
Yeah, it's interesting to see it here in green-red. I'm not sure if there's a third color in Alex Sittner's deck, but yes, in the green-white deck it can work toward Convoke very well. And in the green-black deck, obviously, it fills up your graveyard to, make all of the graveyard interactive spells much stronger.
And here we see the power of Luis Scott-Vargas' deck. He started off with a Research Assistant, obviously a great start for the blue-black deck, a good blocker, and ultimately a looter. But Jerobai Murklurker, one of the draws to be in blue-black, really. On its own, a 1/3. Once you've got a swamp, it becomes a 2/4, and with the ability to give your creatures lifelink, potentially able to make games go much longer so he gets a chance to play his powerful bombs.
Yeah, it's really one of the best uncommons in this set. 4 toughness also very difficult to deal with. Cards like Ulcerate and Lightning Strike are going to need some help if they're going to want to deal with it by Murklurker, and just in general, dealing 2 to creatures that it tangles with, that's really strong in a format where most things have 1 or 2 toughness.
Yeah, I mean, Luis Scott-Vargas, all of his creatures, high toughness, he's able to effectively block with them, knowing that there's going to need to be a pretty good trick if he's going to lose one of his creatures there. Runecrawl Bear for Alex Sittner there. And also, Luis looks like he's got at least some amount of splash going on. He's got a mountain in addition to his islands and swamps there. Potentially sort of lightning strikes or similar to worry about that Alex Sittner's going to have to stop and think about when he's making his attack decisions.
So it looks here like Luis is splashing red. So we may expect to see something like a Heat Ray. It's a good splash. Maybe some Lightning Strike action. Maybe a Nightfire Giant.
Yeah, Nightfire Giant is one of the cards that I'm thinking of because it's one of those ones where there's some of the abilities on the quote-unquote gold cards in the set, so our Murklurkers and so on, are the sort of thing that you only want to activate once a turn. It doesn't really matter if you're splashing Nightfire Giant because you're realistically, if you've got 10 mana, something strange is going on. Whereas the Murklurker, you really want to be able to activate it lots of times, so it's not as easy a one to splash.
And a Phyto-Titan.
Yeah, that one's going to be a tough one to deal with. If it dies, it will come back, though it will come back tapped at the end of turn, so kind of a very slow form of regeneration, but a persistent one and one that Alex Sittner will not have to hold up mana for. So his board now getting pretty hefty.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, and Luis having, used the Research Assistant's looter ability that early on in the game, that's a pretty big mana sink, and his opponent, Alex Sittner, has been using an Elvish Mystic and tapping all of his mana to advance his board state every turn, so Luis could be falling pretty far behind too fast.
In the meantime, though, Luis is content to improve his draws each and every turn. And one of the great things about that Research Assistant is that it's a great excuse for him to hold up mana. So it means that there's a lot more potential tricks that he can threaten. And if he doesn't need to, say, play any kind of counter magic, then he has something to do with that mana at the end of the turn. A Sign in Blood further digging Luis into his deck. He's got the mana, he's got the life to work with, so that's not hurting too much. And he finds a swamp, so he's not holding up Research Assistant mana this turn because he's got a Frost Links to say, Phyto-Titan, no fighting for you for now.
That works out very well. Phyto-Titan's the type of card that, very good at providing somebody with inevitability, but, just holding it down with the Frost Links is just about the best way you can deal with that.
Frostlinks
Besides
there.
exiling it.
Yeah. Frostlinks, the 2/2 that enables you to tap down a creature for a turn. It won't untap. But a Chord of Calling here from Alex Sittner, finding Hornet Queen. Now, Hornet Queen, many players picks for the best rare in the set. It's certainly.
I think many is just Marshall.
No, I've heard it from others. I mean, William Jensen certainly did great work with it at the Pro Tour in his first draft. The Hornet Queen there, the 2/2 flying Death Touch that brings with it 4 insect tokens, all of which also have flying and Death Touch. So now we see a clock in the air that Luis Scott-Vargas is going to struggle to immediately deal with. And on top of that, if they need to block, they're pretty much the best blockers imaginable because they're going to kill whatever it is they block.
Yeah, Hornet Queen able to do a lot of work here. I think Luis would like to find in Garrick's Wake if that is in his deck.
Yeah, there's not too many ways of dealing with that many creatures. So he's blocking and pseudo-trading with Phyto-Titan with his Frostlinks there. Sittner putting a reminder on the top of his deck to say that the Titan will be coming back, something that cannot be said for the cat in this case.
The cat with significantly less lives than the plant.
As it turns out, and a Flesh to Dust there, dealing with Hornet Queen. The Swarm's still very much going, though. And Luis hitting his land drops, which, given that his deck seems to be a fairly sort of controlling type of build, is certainly not unwelcome. But this a big play potentially here for Luis here. He's able to get a few creatures back from his graveyard. He's got Endless Obedience. Now, Endless Obedience doesn't actually just target your own graveyard, so he's gone straight for that Hornet Queen. This, probably a fairly good way of dealing with those insect tokens on the other side of the board, saying, I can 1-for-1 all day long.
Yeah, I'm sure he's pretty excited about picking up a Hornet Queen with that Endless Obedience.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that the original Animate Dead had the ability to animate creatures from opponents' graveyards, but it's not something we necessarily see lots of in modern day Magic, so that's certainly a play that it's worthwhile everyone knowing about. And actually, even if you don't play lots of Team Limited, this is a really interesting format to watch and a useful one if you do draft a lot, because the power level of these decks, to my mind, very similar to those of a good draft deck, and you can start to get an idea of both how archetypes are put together, but actually also how they match up. So how does the red-green deck typically look against your more controlling decks? How does it look against your more aggressive decks? Over the course of the weekend, we're going to see an awful lot of Magic, and that information valuable if you're hitting up the draft queues anytime soon. So Luis Scott-Vargas here, slowly but surely putting together some kind of an attack plan here.
Yeah, Coral Barrier coming down. Going to make a squid here. And the thing is that Sittner can't really apply a ton of pressure like in terms of attacking besides the Phyto-Titan, because the lifelink on the Murklurker just means that Luis, if involved in a race, is just going to have a big advantage here.
And he has blockers for days against that Phyto-Titan. It's not even really worth it throwing any of his insect tokens under that bus for now if you can help it, because the Flight and Death Touch on them, I mean, Death Touch against a Phyto-Titan, a lot of things kill it anyway, and he'd rather keep those flyers around potentially. In the meantime, Research Assistant continuing to toil away, finding
assisting in the research.
Absolutely. And Divination. So Divination plus Sign in Blood in Luis Scott-Vargas' deck. He's got a deck that's able to draw a lot of cards, able to find ways to buy the time to draw a lot of cards, a key component in these control decks.
This is such a Luis Scott-Vargas deck. This is the dirtiest team sealed deck I've seen so far this weekend. It is. I
don't think this is a coincidence.
Yes, Luis loves to play these decks where he's just drawing more cards than his opponent, really grinding the game out. A lot of the time when you're watching him play matches of Limited, you're like, I don't see any way that he can win this game. And then, you know, you fail to realize that he has 7 cards in his hand and his opponent has 1, and suddenly it's a very different
He doesn't need too
situation.
much of an opening at that point. And the other thing is that, I mean, Luis is one of the best players in the world at this kind of deck, not just because of that, but actually because I would say he's among the quickest to read a board situation and make decisions when he needs to. Something that you always have to watch if you're playing control is the clock. Sometimes winning games can take a little bit longer than for your aggro decks, and Luis Scott-Vargas absolutely able to shift gears when he needs to.
It's like the lion, you know. He's careful with his choices, but very aggressive when he decides to strike.
And Alex Sittner here having to kind of play a bit of a waiting game, really. I mean, a wall of mulch there, not really doing a whole lot for him. I'm guessing that's going to get cashed in for a card. There we go. I mean, it's the sort of thing that I'm sure that Sittner, when he was building his deck, he thought, you know, I can Court of Calling for a Hornet Queen. How much more do I ever need to do? Turns out, possibly a little bit more. An Accursed Spirit there for Luis Scott-Vargas. Now he has a win condition.
That's going to be able to attack constantly into this board, and he's got enough blockers to make this game go long, especially the life link that Accursed Spirit's going to be gaining from the Merc Lurker. I mean, things are looking very good here for Luis Scott-Vargas, even though his side of the board is much smaller than his opponent's.
Yeah, I mean, Alex Sittner has a lot of creatures on the board, but in practical terms, they're all just kind of dudes. They're hanging about, duding around, not necessarily creating any kind of advantage for Sittner, whereas the creatures that Luis Scott-Vargas on the board, you've got insects that are saying Fighter Titan's not going to do anything. You've got Research Assistant saying I'm going to be drawing the extra cards and ending up with just better quality cards in hand than my opponent. You've got the Merc Lurker that's giving creatures lifelink and meaning that Luis isn't losing a race. And then you've got the missing piece of the puzzle, the Accursed Spirit, that's saying, hi guys, I'm just going to win the game.
Yeah, I am going to kill you.
And it looks like Sittner does have an answer to the Accursed Spirit, though. That there, a Hunt the Weak, which easily able to find a big enough creature on Sittner's side of the board to make this a favourable fight. The question is, does Luis have counter magic?
And I mean, if Luis probably has something to work with here because he's... okay.
He just gave lifelink there, so you could get a little bit of extra life as his Accursed Spirit died. Let's see what the next piece of the puzzle is for Luis Scott-Vargas in terms of closing out this game, because the 5/5 that's now in play, a little bit of a concern for Scott-Vargas.
Ooh, well, this could be what the splash is about. It's a Glacial Crasher. Now, Glacial Crasher is a 5/5 trample for 6, right? And it can attack if you control a mountain. A lot of people...
If a player controls a mountain.
Yes. A lot of people don't love this card. I think it's amazing. I think a 5/5 trample for 6 in this format is so good that this gives us a huge incentive to be playing blue-red.
And in this case, Luis Scott-Vargas not willing to chance it in terms of having a mountain. He's just got one in his deck. Obviously, in this matchup, he wouldn't need it for his Glacial Crasher to be able to attack. But this way around, he's just a little safer. He loses an insect there to Forge Devil. Meanwhile, Alex Sittner losing a life. But yeah, super powerful in this format. It looks like, yeah, plenty of action in Luis Scott-Vargas' hand here. But he does now need to figure out what he wants to do in terms of attacking. There certainly are enough threats on Sittner's side of the board that he can't just merrily roll in. But the 5/5 is going to be great on blocks, especially when it becomes a life-linking 5/5.
The Phytotitan, though, doing very good work just grinding this game out. Despite Luis Scott-Vargas casting Divination, sifting through his deck with Research Assistant, casting Sign in Blood, he's still not necessarily ahead on cards in the long term here because of the Phytotitan.
A couple of notes just from the other games. Eric Froelich has already won his entire match, even though this is still the first game for Luis Scott-Vargas. So Luis, a little smirk on his face already because he knows that his team is already halfway to a match win at this point, and he's not even finished his first game. Now, the downside of that, Jacob Winn has currently lived up to his name, winning game 1 against Paul Cheon.
That's a good name. He's not only a Jacob, but he's also a winner.
Can't argue with that. But meanwhile, Luis Scott-Vargas, he needs to just sort of actually find a way of closing this game out. At present, he's certainly not in a bad spot, but needs to find a way of actually dealing damage to his opponent, which I have to think that Luis has planned for his deck for games to go this long. I'm not 100% sure that Sittner would really have been hoping to have a game where each player has 9, 10 lands in play.
I'm somewhat surprised that See that negate in Luis's hand. Maybe he didn't have that in hand when Hunt the Weak was cast. He must not have.
Maybe Luis is just grandstanding and wants to get as much time on camera as possible.
Oh, that definitely sounds like him, you know.
Luis Scott-Vargas, of course, one of our commentators at the Pro Tour on those occasions where he doesn't make Sunday himself. We love to have him in the booth, but we love to watch him playing Magic all the more. One of the top players in the game and putting on a bit of a display in terms of how you do control in this matchup here.
And that Phyto-Titan, though, it's going to keep rumbling in. Here it's tapped because it just came back this turn, but every other turn at least, that thing is going to come in. And Luis, while he had a ton of blockers from that Hornet Queen, they're almost completely exhausted at this point. And it's looking like he's going to need to find a more permanent answer to that, or he's going to need to start attacking himself.
Yeah, I mean, inevitability is what Phyto-Titan's all about. And if the game goes long enough, it will successfully win it. But realistically, I don't know if it's possible that it's ever going to get a chance to swing through unimpeded. And Luis, thanks to a little bit of life gain here and there, effectively hasn't taken any damage at all.
Oh my goodness. And that is the Fester Gloom Polymorphous Jest combo. So
wow, just
a Plague Wind right here. Alex Sittner, all of his creatures becoming 0/1 frogs.
That's the Polymorphous Jest
flies
part
out of here. And then Fester Gloom giving all of his creatures -1/-1.
Build your own Plague Wind. It doesn't
beautiful.
Get better than that.
It's about as good as it gets.
And they all lose their abilities. So does that mean the Phyto-Titan's not going to be coming back?
Well, it still has the ability in the graveyard now. And the Scavenger does get to stick around because even though it becomes a 1/1, it actually, that makes it bigger because it originally was a 0/0 with 5+1/+1 counters. So now it's a 1/1 or 0/1. I'm sorry. And yeah, so the Scavenger's still around, still is something, but Luis in a much better position to win this game at this point.
That was absolutely colossal.
Yeah, and with all these research assistants in Luis's deck, he can set up that combo over and over. He's playing Sign and Blood. He's playing Divination. This is something that Luis's deck can do pretty often.
Oh my. Restocks don't get much better than this, guys.
No, they do not.
So Hornet Queen's the easy bit. Negate is the easy bit for Luis Scott-Vargas. He doesn't even bother waiting to see what the second target is because that one cannot be allowed to resolve if you want to win this game. An Occurred Chieftain from Alex Sittner, a pretty nice follow-up, along with an Elvish Mystic. So this game not over by any stretch, folks, but that's going to be a nice combo for Luis Scott-Vargas that he's going to get a lot of people with this weekend.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he's probably not too happy he had to show that one off in Game 1 here. Game 1 of Round 2. Of course, most other people in the room aren't going to be privy to what's happening on the stream.
But, I mean, if there's people that you want to know what they're up to, Luis Scott-Vargas, you know, he's taking a masterclass here. A Shivan Reef here, supporting what must be a red splash. Because if it was just a mountain in Luis's deck, then it may just have been there for that the Crasher. But there must be something that he can do with red
That
mana.
would be a bit ambitious, though, just splashing for the Crasher.
It's something that I've heard tell of people doing, especially, I mean, we've seen that he's got an Evolving Wilds in his deck.
Yeah, that's true. And in Draft's Gone Wrong, it often happens. Here in Team Sealed, you would hope that your decks would be strong enough to not have to do that.
So, yeah, potentially a Heat Ray, a Lightning Strike perhaps. But for now, neither of those cards in Luis Scott-Vargas' hand. He's got to worry about some pretty hefty creatures on the other side of the board and something big coming. That a Genesis Hydra, X being...
For 8.
Oh my, yeah. And
but only a few cards left now in
well, there must be only a few cards left in both decks. I mean, if we think about Luis Scott-Vargas, he's been looting pretty aggressively this game. It would be unfortunate for him to find that even though he's been able to deal with all of these various threats on the other side of the board, that the actual thing that kills him is being unable to draw any more cards. Yeah, a well-stocked graveyard, and Luis didn't have many cards in hand, but Flesh to Dust, enough to deal with that Genesis Hydra. Sittner with a large proportion of the rares on their team's end of things.
It looks like it. And Kurd Chieftain is, while not a rare itself, more powerful than the vast majority of rares in the set.
And at this stage in the game as well, where Sittner, with the ability to use it twice in a turn, Luis saying, I've got my window, I'm going to use it. Covenant of Blood on that Kurd Chieftain. Luis Scott-Vargas now on 30 life. Barely seems possible, but that's what happens when you have a Merc Lurker in play for the entirety of the game without any real threats there.
Ooh, and Burning Anger now.
Another powerful card for Sittner.
Yes, Sittner's deck is very strong, and there's Nightfire Giant, so that's what Luis Scott-Vargas is splashing for.
And that potentially a great answer to a creature with Burning Anger on it if he can get enough mana to kill it off, which I think he might have next turn. And Alex Sittner says, I can't win this game. You've got too much going on, Luis. Let's go to a game 2. And while we're going to a game 2 there, we already see, look at that, there's Eric Froelich. He's sat in between
we've got a little powwow going on
there because he's already won his match. Paul Cheon has squared up his match against Jacob Winn. So Paul Cheon knows that if he wins his game, it's all over. If Luis wins his game, it's all over. Realistically, I think there's a good chance that Luis is going to take a little bit longer than Paul Cheon. So what we might try and do is just jump across to the Cheon match when that starts so we can see a little bit more of the overall landscape of the Cheontourage decks before the end of this match. Now, Paul Cheon up against Jacob Winn in the plaid shirt at the back there.
Now, something interesting that often happens in teams here is that 2 matches might finish and a third might be potentially going to time. Now, if a team's matches are 1-1 and then the third match draws, well, then the match is just a draw. However, Luis's deck is slow enough where it's actually possible that he draws during game 2, and if he's up a game and the matches are tied 1-1, then he ends up winning that match and his team ends up winning the total match.
So he could win his match 1-0.
Correct.
In principle. And then that would be enough to just tip the balance.
Correct.
And something that we see a little bit, and actually it's more with the slightly more inexperienced teams, I would say, in general, is that while the first match to finish might finish pretty quickly, as more players pile up to give their 2 cents worth about how to make decisions, all of a sudden the last match kind of grinds along a little bit.
Definitely.
We will let you know that realistically there's probably going to be slightly longer time between rounds at this GP than we've seen at some others. And that not really a function of any poor tournament organization or anything else. It's literally just that once time gets called on the round, those 5 extra turns, there's a good chance you've got 3 people on each side trying to find the right line, trying to find the right decision. I mean,
things get really complicated when all 3 matches are still happening when time gets called.
But yeah, I mean, even last round we saw that between time getting called and the last match finishing, there's close to 20 minutes or so. So conveniently for you, we've got loads and loads of content to show you in that time, but it's possible that you're going to have to wait a little bit longer for matches in this GP than perhaps you might do in some of the other ones. But we'll make sure to bring you as many matches as we possibly can. This match here, game 3 of Paul Cheon against Jacob Winn. Jacob Winn on the play there, leading off with a mountain, seeing the exact same thing from his opponent.
Now there's some overlap here. We see that Jacob is playing red, as is Sittner, his teammate. So
red, one of the better colors though, one of the deeper colors in M15. Raise the alarm there from Jacob Winn. Red, white, I mean, you highlighted them at the top of the show as being probably the 2 most powerful colors in...
Oh, certainly. And I don't even think it's remotely close. I think red and white are far superior to the other colors in Magic 2015 Limited.
And building a deck with both those colors, I would hope that there's some fairly specific synergies being exploited here because you're kind of using up a lot of good cards in one spot if you're building a red-white deck. The Raise the Alarm tokens here, looking to attack unimpeded. We'll see what sort of a follow-up Jacob Winn has. Nothing at all. Now, what does that signal? I mean, could there be any kind of a trick there, or is it literally just a bad draw, do we think?
He could have another Raise the Alarm here. which is what it looks like.
There we go.
It's happening.
So Sanctified Charges are what I'm going to be looking out for here at this point.
Yeah, and I think Sanctified Charge is definitely the type of deck that they were trying to put together here. I mean, multiple copies have raised the alarm. He is a deck that's just looking to run his opponent over, I imagine.
And a Krenko's Enforcer there for Paul Cheon. This game 3, so he obviously knows that his opponent has some amount of red going on. So he's made a decision about how he feels about that. And I'm guessing how he feels about this Paragon there from the Jacob Winn side of the table is not very good, because now all of those 1/1 soldiers getting +1/+1 from the Paragon, they're now 2/2s. Paul Cheon down to just 10 life. It looks like it's possible that we might have to rely on Scott-Vargas. Hunt the Weak there, though. A great answer to the Paragon. Krenko's Enforcer now a 3/3, sitting back, wanting to block with it probably. But dealing with that Paragon, absolutely crucial, because now we're in a situation where those soldiers much, much easier to deal with.
Inspired Charge here would put Paul down to 1 remaining life and clear the Krenko's Enforcer off this board. And he's been using his mana efficiently from turn 3 on. He just got completely run over by this draw. But then again, his opponent may be out of gas, and he might be able to pull back into this here.
And he's just got the double white, so Sanctified Charge available on time. But it looks like a slightly different option being gone with initially here.
Marked by Honor here.
So now he has 1 3/3 Vigilance creature and a bunch of other soldiers going in for value. We can see that Jacob Winn has hit the portion of the game where he says, I don't mind losing creatures here and there. I just want to get whatever damage through I can whenever I can. And that's a scary position. When you see that look in your opponent's eye, you're like, oh. Suddenly we're playing a different game of Magic, and I don't know how well set up I am to do that. So Cheon here electing to kill off a soldier and take 5. Sorry, take 5. So single digits now for Cheon. In principle, facing lethal next turn, though. In reality, I'm sure he's got something to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, if his opponent has a removal spell, then he could hypothetically lose the next turn. Now his opponent needs 2. But I think he'll be fine.
And Generator Servant, not exactly what you want to see here. It's a 2/1 for 2, which is an efficient rate, and in principle can accelerate you into something incredible, but in practice, at this point, it's likely to be blocking and trading with a 1/1. Half a raise the alarm.
And I think Cheon may... he'll probably block the 1/1.
And various people in our chat here desperately hoping that Paul Cheon draws Cone of Flame. That would be the perfect answer to this board state and suddenly mean that he was in a much, much better position here.
Yeah, Cone of Flame, I think pretty easily the best uncommon in the set. Good things come in cones. Ice Cream, burn spells to kill 3 of your opponent's creatures.
I'll take all of them, as many as you want to give me.
Dogs, you know, coming out of the vet.
So Jacob Winn here saying, I'm going to keep on attacking. I'm going to force the decision on your part. Still representing any number of different... I mean, any trick whatsoever from Jacob Winn puts him in a fantastic spot. Even without, he's going to be in a position where he's really, really threatening Paul Cheon's life total. And at the moment, Cheon on 5. As soon as he gets to 4, that means that Sunburn spells will kill him. Once he gets to 3, Lightning Strike gets turned on as a kill. He's in all sorts of trouble here.
And I wonder here, does Paul have some type of... Oh, are these his blocks? These are interesting. So it looks like he's blocking a soldier with his Krenko's Enforcer, and he's just chumping the 3/3 with the... Oh, no, never mind.
Yeah, Paul here carefully thinking about his blocks. Everything's coming in. He just touched his lands for a second there, kind of signaling that there might be some kind of a trick, but no, he says, you know what, I'll take 1. You've got a soldier. I've got nothing. What's your follow-up? Borderland Marauder, not the worst. The 1/2 that attacks for 3, teaming up with a soldier, that will be enough to deal with Paul Cheon's life total, unless he's got something to say. It looks like some fruity mana bases on both sides here, because it's not just Scott-Vargas who's playing with 3 colors. I think I saw a swamp in Paul Cheon's hand.
I saw the swamp as well.
His play, but Ancient Silverback blocks the borderland, and there's the lightning strike. That'll do
That's it.
There's the match. So we have another. This is our second round in a row that's gone down to the final match. We're going to be jumping back across to see how Luis Scott-Vargas is doing in his game 2 against Alex Sittner. Luis Scott-Vargas currently a game up. He's got a Wall of Frost. He's got that Nightfire Giant, but he's facing down. Well, it looks like he's already killed off Hornet Queen herself. The insects are still going, though. We'll get the live turtles up for you in a second there. It seems unlikely to me that he's also at 4.
Although, I mean, he has been getting hit by all of these insects. All right.
8 life. This is a squeaker. We're going to need...
Yeah, a bit of a precarious situation here for Luis.
Yeah, I mean, he's in a position at the moment where he has 9 lands. If he draws 1 more land, then he can double activate his Nightfire Giant, which is certainly a relevant proposition. In it comes. Now, I'd be tempted to use the abilities now, just because I'd be worried about a Titanic Growth or similar just killing me next turn if I don't kill off the tokens before they start hitting the red zone. Looks like Luis kind of feels the same way. Always a very gratifying position when the Hall of Famer takes the same line of play that you just called. Probably means it was the right one. And Fighter Titan, not what Luis Scott-Vargas wanted to see here.
Well, with the wall in play, it's not the end of the world.
And it is
Still
the end of the
quite
world,
good.
it's just a slower end.
Yes. And Nightfire Giant does a pretty good job of holding back Fighter Titan as well.
I mean, if he wants to spend 10 mana... Oh, sorry.
That's just 5 every turn.
Just 5. My
Yeah.
bad, yeah. I mean, here we just see again and again the power of these quote-unquote gold cards. Everything's coming in. What do you want to do, Luis?
This is actually quite interesting. Yeah, I like this play. He's going to chump with the Wall of Frost as opposed to trying to shoot it. But he's not going to give himself an opportunity to get blown out.
Now that Fighter Titan, because it's been blocked by a Wall of Frost, it won't untap next turn.
Nope. It's basically like it died.
Yeah. So certainly a precarious spot for the Hall of Famer, but one where there's room for some plays.
I like his spot here. I think Nightfire Giant matches up very well against the opponent's board.
Luis perhaps thinking better of that attack.
I like the attack. I think he's going to.
Yeah, with just a 2-2 left to block on the other side of the board, not too worried about how things are going to shape up here. Looks like he's got a Quickling in hand, so he knows that he can keep these giants safe if he wishes. He just needs to carefully plan out how much mana he's going to leave up. So he is killing off so he can get a swing in immediately, dropping Alex Sittner down to 11. And Luis there just reminding Sittner about the ability of Wall of Frost. So many different reasons that Phyto Titan's slow. This is just an extra one to add to the equation. And there's the big Genesis Hydra. Again, so this time for 7. Last time it was for 8. A lot of lands come through. What a mulch. That's not too exciting.
Yeah, it looks like he doesn't have much in the way of options here. Wall of Mulch or Reclamation Sage are really the two best options.
I mean, the 7/7 in body in itself, certainly not the worst. But normally when you cast a Genesis Hydra for that much, you're looking for something bigger and better. David Ochoa was telling me that yesterday he found himself casting it for 7 when he knew he had Hornet Queen in his deck. Hornet Queen already gone for Alex Sittner. And a Flesh to Dust, meaning that Genesis Hydra also gone. Only getting a Wall of Mulch out of the equation, really not what he was looking for there.
Yeah, I mean, still though, your opponent used the Flesh to Dust, one of the best cards that he has against your deck, and you still end up a card. So things could be worse for sure.
Attack of the Giants. Now if you're sitting here, do you block with a Wall of Mulch, which means that effectively you use up 5 of Luis's mana, but you don't get to draw a card? Or do you take your hit now and say, the card's pretty valuable to me, I'll figure this out later?
I think you definitely take the hit then. But oh, actually, he's just dead because Nightfire Giant finishes the deal there. It's able to attack him and then combine with the pair of Sign in Blood that Luis had in hand.
Sign in Blood. It's rarely
take him
used
out.
mode as a burn spell.
Yeah.
And that enough to finish.